Under the soft hush of an early morning sky, Jack stirred awake in a house that wasn't his own, yet somehow felt familiar. The quiet hum of rural life drifted in through the window, the crow of a distant rooster, the simmer of something on the stove. He stepped out to find Tien already in motion. She moved like morning light, gentle, unnoticed at first, but slowly illuminating everything. She greeted him not with words, but with a warm glass of water, her eyes speaking more than her lips ever could. There was something about her silence that filled the space with meaning, and as he accepted the glass, he also accepted the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. Later, Jack invited her to try the treadmill tucked away in the corner of the house. "I get dizzy," she whispered, hesitant yet trusting. Still, she stepped onto the machine holding the rails as if learning to walk all over again. Jack stood close, not to guide her, but to be there in case she faltered. And falter she did, laughing nervously, stepping down, cheeks flushed. She apologized for not being able to run. But Jack wasn't watching her failure. He was watching her courage. In that vulnerable, clumsy moment, she revealed more strength than any perfect performance ever could. He was used to women who presented confidence like armor. But Tien was different. Her fragility was honest. And in that honesty, he felt something pure and unfamiliar grow inside him. That morning, she cooked breakfast noodles, eggs, a hint of ham. The steam rose from the bowls like incense in a quiet chapel. She moved around the kitchen with the grace of someone who had cooked for many, though likely not for herself. She served Jack first, watching carefully for his reaction, always asking if the seasoning was enough, if the broth was warm. There were no declarations, no romantic gestures, just care woven into every movement. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was simply being who she was, someone who healed others through the smallest acts. And Jack, who had lived years surrounded by noise and ambition, found himself craving this kind of quiet love, the kind that didn't shout, but settled gently into your bones. The rain began to fall sometime afternoon, soft at first, then steadily soaking the roads as they made their way to visit Uncle Min. The house was still, the door ajar. Jack called out, but received no answer. Then they saw him collapsed in bed, fevered, fragile. Panic rose in Jack's throat, but Tien moved with calm urgency. She pressed her hand to the old man's forehead, whispered his name, rushed to boil porridge and fetch towels. While Jack scrambled to contact help, she had already become the caretaker, her presence the only stable thing in the room. It wasn't obligation that moved her. It was instinct. She didn't know this man well, but she knew suffering, and she refused to let it go unanswered. Watching her, Jack felt the hollow places in his heart begin to fill. That evening, after the doctor had come and gone, Jack and Tien stayed behind. She sat near Uncle Min, coaxing spoonfuls of porridge into his mouth, wiping his hands, tucking in his blanket. She told Jack almost in passing that she grew up in the mountains, that life had always been hard, that floods had once swept through her farm, that she had learned to endure because there was no other choice. But there was no bitterness in her voice, only calm, only kindness. Jack watched her and thought, this is the kind of woman people write stories about, but rarely meet. Not because she wanted to be noticed, but because she loved without condition. She reminded him of a river, steady, quiet, but capable of reshaping everything it touched. That night, Tien didn't ask for permission to stay. She simply brought out a blanket, arranged a space on the floor near Uncle Min's bed, and quietly took her place as if she belonged. Jack offered to stay too, and she nodded without surprise. The room fell into a sacred kind of silence filled only with the soft sound of Uncle Min's breathing and the occasional creak of wood settling into the cold. Jack lay on the couch nearby, unable to sleep. He watched the outline of her in the dim light, her back straight, even in rest. Her fingers twitching slightly, as if still serving someone in a dream. In that stillness, he realized something he hadn't dared admit. Before the world he once chased, the one of deals, deadlines, and destinations, meant nothing if it didn't lead him to someone like her. Someone who loved people not for what they could offer, but simply because they existed. In the morning, when the mist had barely lifted, Tien was already awake. She had gathered perilla leaves from the backyard and was grinding them into porridge with quiet dedication. Jack joined her, taking in the way the early sun kissed the dew off her hair. She looked up at him, surprised but unflinching. "He's better," she said, smiling gently. His fever is lower. Jack didn't respond immediately. He just watched her hands, watched her patience, and then he offered to help. It was the first time he'd cooked beside anyone with such stillness in his heart. It wasn't romance in the traditional sense. It was something older, something steadier. A quiet promise being born through repetition, through shared labor, through two people choosing to stay when it would have been easier to leave. The following days settled into a rhythm neither of them had planned, but both came to crave. They tended to Uncle Min's meals, cleaned his garden, took turns walking to the market for fresh herbs. Jack canceled meetings he once thought were too important to miss. Tien barely spoke of the past, but every now and then she'd mention a mountain trail, a missing roof tile, a long walk home in the rain. Each story was like a brushstroke, painting a portrait of resilience wrapped in gentleness. Jack, who had once prided himself on efficiency, found himself slowing down, lingering at the stove a little longer, folding laundry more carefully, listening more than he spoke. Love, he realized, wasn't always a spark. Sometimes it was a slow fire, steady and warm and impossible to put out. One afternoon, Jack took Tien aside. They sat beneath a grapefruit tree, the leaves whispering above them like old friends. He told her he wanted to rebuild the farm. Not just patch it up, but truly rebuild it brick by brick. It won't be easy, he said, and it'll cost more than I planned. But I don't care. You've carried so much alone. Let me carry something for once. Tien didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the soil, her fingers gently tracing patterns in the dust. You don't owe me anything, Jack, she whispered. I never asked you to fix my life. He reached over, placing his hand over hers. I know, he said, but I want to. Not because I have to. Because I want to build something with you in it. And in that moment, surrounded by fallen fruit and quiet skies, she nodded. Not out of obligation, but out of trust. She was tired of being strong alone. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to be strong together. As days turned to weeks, the repairs began. Jack brought workers to the site, but he also worked with his own hands. Tien oversaw the garden, replanted herbs, chased chickens back into their coops. At night, they sat on the old steps of the house, eating simple meals and talking about dreams neither had ever spoken aloud. Jack wanted a life that wasn't run by numbers. Tien wanted to teach children to read. They didn't make promises, they made plans. Real ones. Tangible. Quiet. Full of soil and sunlight and shared silence. The kind of life that doesn't end in fireworks, but begins with roots. And then one evening, the wind carried the scent of blooming grapefruit blossoms across the yard. Uncle Min sat upright for the first time in days, watching the two of them from the porch. He didn't say much, just smiled, nodding slowly, as if giving his blessing without needing words. Jack stood, walked toward Tien, and simply asked, "Can I stay?" She looked at him, not startled, not hesitant, and replied, "You already have." In that moment, they weren't two people from different worlds trying to find common ground. They were two lives battered, stitched together with care, but standing side by side, ready to grow something new. They didn't call it love, not yet. They didn't need to. Love was already there in every pot of soup, every shared umbrella, every long silence that didn't need filling. Love was in the porridge in the early mornings, in the hand that reached out not to rescue but to remain. And sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are the ones that happen quietly, when no one's watching, under a leaking roof, beside an old man's bedside, in a kitchen filled with steam and second chances.